This begins my work. This happened at the time that my son died under mysterious circumstances, and I got involved with justice. He died in Rome, Italy, and out of my naivete, I tried to figure out what happened, and I learned a lot about the mafia, the dark side of Italy, and to back off of that, and to find some other kind of resolution in my life and the life of our family for what had happened at this huge loss. And so I started doing justice pieces, thinking, well, maybe if I do enough justice pieces, we'll get justice. But in the process, I learned that it really wasn't justice that we needed truth. That's what I was trying to find. And that's something to look for, to try to find out what is the artist that you choose trying to do? What are they trying to talk about? This would be an example of the feather of truth came forth for me. It took 5 or 6 or 7 of these pieces, all of which are close to 40 inches, before I got to, from the justice feeling that I must find out, to that little feather of truth. Comes out of Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, out of a lot of mythology, actually. The snake came up in the work, and at the time I felt like the snake was a symbol of evil that I was trying to deal with. When I did this, I thought, if we just keep our foot on evil, it can't get us. It's when we forget about it, when we sweet talk it. That's when it's dangerous. And so I felt that this foot on the snake, if I just keep my foot on the snake, it goes belly up. It's still there, but it goes belly up. Well, now I have learned over time that you'll find every Madonna has got her foot on a snake. So this is an example of the kind of information that is in our unconscious that came up before I knew that. You'll see it now that you know it. It'll always be there. That's sort of like what I was talking about before, where you have a talisman that comes along with you in your work, like the snake did. And I'm very pleased that the university here has installed 4 of the justice pieces in the Cowell Provost courtyard. So there's a permanent exhibition of those pieces. And there's also one on the roof of the MA at Museum Downtown. And I mentioned Daniel Rhodes. That piece in the background is Daniel. So Santa Cruz has been very good to me that way. It's very, very nice to have them there. These are other public pieces. This one is down in the mall, and this was a result of studying in Japan that I did this ode to the kimono. And it's still there. It was installed after the earthquake. This one is in the Cowell Provost courtyard. It happens to be when the roses are blooming. That you would have to get permission from the provost, who loves to have people come and look at it, but the gate to it is locked. However, if next to it is the printing studio, the book printing studio, and I think you had a good experience there. If you knock on the door and say, I want to see the courtyard, they let you in. There are people that will do that. This is also at Cowell. It's in front of the Eloise Pickard Smith Gallery. This was a student piece. This patio was remodeled. They built in more of a coffee shop there, which I'm sure you all know now. At that time, they dedicated it to Coeleen Kiebert, so I'm very proud of that. This piece is a bronze china rock that I did, and this piece is Nick Jonk. He's a Dutch sculptor whose work I saw in Europe and tracked down and studied with and became lifelong friends. Learned so much from as a sculptor and as an entrepreneur, I'd say too. And our family gave this piece, and it's even the snake, and my intention is that the women on campus who are dealing with whatever you have to deal with, that snake, like the snake on my justice pieces, that snake is what we are dealing with all the time. In elections, whatever. It's the imagery that comes up. And I thought Nick's sculpture, Eve and the Snake, which I think he did in the 50s or 60s, is old piece, would be very appropriate on campus. This is how I was inspired by the astronauts, an exhibition of the astronaut suits in New York at Cooper Hewitt. They are so beautiful if you get a chance to see them. They are so sculptural. And so I certainly was inspired by that. You can see it in my work here. This was the first one. I came home from New York, and this was the first maquette of many, many Bardo pieces. I called them Bardos, going down into the depths of the Bardo. The Bardo angels.
Deep divers.
Yeah, that would take me down into the depths to understand where my son was and what was going on. It made me laugh to look at these suits, because to think that they would think that they could get out of a capsule and walk on the moon in a canvas suit that's just stitched together, you know, but they did and they do. And they're very inspiring, the great helmets that they wear. So I went collecting to salvage yards, collecting metal things that are so beautiful, shouldn't be thrown away. And I found a camera shop that was closing after having been here for a long time, and so I started to take molds of the lenses. They're just wonderful. You know, the cameras today are not quite so interesting when you open them up. If you find an old one, take it, get it, because the craftsmanship that's inside of these, they're just beautiful. Animal skulls. I think these are marmot skulls that I found in New York at a shop next to the Natural History Museum where you can buy wonderful things. You can buy skulls of small animals. They're probably large too. And light meters, gauges, and then these are stations. Howell's, somebody said you should see Howell's Moving Castle, that movie. And the movie inspired me to start making these space ships to go into the Bardo with. This has got a lot of neat things on it. It's just the craftsmanship, you know, that should be recognized and used and adorned. And these are the again from the election. After I did I Must Do Something. Then this is offering the apple to Mr. President in hopes that he would take a bite. But I began to realize that that wasn't going to happen. I think we were all pretty naive. I was pretty naive. And after many attempts of offering the apple, this is a piece I did that is so many apples, so few takers. This is how I felt about it happening, just stunned that she didn't win. Ukraine. When Ukraine was invaded and they showed us pictures of the beautiful homes that the women and men in Ukraine, the architects, the beautiful culture, the artwork that was there in Ukraine. And you know, they'll go after the artists first. They try to take down the culture first. And that's what we're fighting now, is to save our culture from the authoritarian rule that says it must be this way or it must be that way. We thought maybe if we could pray for the Ukraine women to be able to get back together soon, to do their quilting, to bring their beauty back up. And so we made these tiles and created this tile hanging in honor of those women. And then this is this last election. This is the women in the Garden of Eden. My hope that we as women would find our place in the Garden of Eden, that there'd be a seat there for us, many seats there for us. And so these pieces were made during the campaign. Yes, the gold is a final luster glaze. Sometimes I'll start to construct with sculpture raku, which is a much more robust clay to get that form and support going, and then I'll come in with the porcelain. And I feel like I'm using my masculine energy to get going and build the piece, and then I bring in the porcelain. And it's those spikes that are coming up and getting much more delicate if you see the work itself. and then they go through a high fire and several firings, and then the last firing is the luster glaze, and that's 14 karat gold, something like that. It has to be treated carefully, but it's a separate, very low fire, and it's the preciousness of it. The building happens with big chunks of clay, and I don't worry about building the whole thing and then hollowing it out. I kind of hollow as I go, and then fire it, but I'll put some underglazes where I think I'm going to want the color to be deeper, if I'm going to put an overglaze, in case I overglaze it. And I fire it to bisque ware. Then I stain the whole piece with rutile. And I do that in order to add to the depth of the form, so that it's like I'm shading. Most of my training as an art student at Minnesota was in watercolor. And I think that helps me to be very comfortable with glazes. I'm not afraid of glazes. And so then I do the whole thing with rutile, and I wipe it back as if the rain and wind, like China Rock. I wipe it back, and then I put my glazes on it, high fire, and go to cone 6, and then see how it is. And I might glaze it again and again and again. So some pieces like these were fired 6-7 times. So that's Daniel Rhodes, whom I mentioned, who works with the raw clay, trying to listen to what the clay has to say. And and this is Stephen DeStabler, who is one of our California artists. Is he on your list?
At San Francisco State, I believe.
Yes.
I got to interview him years ago.
Oh, really?
When that was released, but that was
Oh.
great. It was amazing work. He did a lot of these very kind of Egyptian-style pieces, you could say. You talk a lot about them, but when he moved into casting them in bronze, he could get away with much thinner elements than with just ceramic, because these are quite tall, or sometimes large wings. Blocks of clay, but they look just like the ceramic, because the bronze you can do that, but it can be stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful work.
Very. This is Gertrude Mohold. Oh, I'm very taken with her, because she just works with the chunks of clay, and this would be. So these are ceramic pieces of hers. As a way of studying an artist, I'll make something as close to the way they would have built it. So I did this piece as a copy of Gertrude and got a sense of how she builds and what she's thinking, how unself-conscious she is. It feels when she's working. And this is my own self-portrait. She does her own self-portraits, does full body, almost like Viola Frey pieces. Yeah. Giacometti, who influences us all.
I included a picture in the slideshow of a piece like this.
Yeah. And you could do a whole thing on the way the men dressed. And the Japanese dress like this too, when they're at the wheel throwing. Yeah. This is Betty Woodman. This is another wonderful artist to study. She was rejected. She offered a couple of these vases to the Metropolitan for their big floral thing that they do in the entry there, and they rejected it and said no ceramics. Then they changed their mind and decided that ceramics are an art form after all. They even gave her a one-woman show, and these finally made it in the net. Henry Moore is very much the inspiration of another artist. I mentioned Nick Yonk, who did the Eve and the Snake. This is Nick Yonk's work, and he was in the Netherlands, north of Amsterdam. But he knew Henry Moore and was very influenced by him. It was nice to know that the artists that influence the artists that you're looking at. And let's go on. I think these are other artists. Simone Leigh, here's an example of Simone Leigh taking another artist. She took Degas and made her own piece from it. And here you can see the beginning of it happening, and then that large piece happened. But is a good example of letting yourself be influenced.
Well, yeah, this is you guys. A lot of you know the Impressionist painter Degas, and he did a lot of kind of gestural wax sculptures that went into bronze. And then this is a kind of a bigger piece, yay big, of a ballerina dance with an actual tutu that's in bronze.
Yeah.
Again, known mostly as an Impressionist painter, but did do some stuff. So that might be somebody who could go on your list. Who works in both, and this is great to see influenced, 100 years later.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah. And this is the one who has influenced me very much at the beginning of the Navigator pieces that you were looking at. She works in wood and canvas and metal. And she's coming back into my world again now. This is canvas and metal and wood.
Was she a Midwestern? Was she from upper Midwest, do you know? Or I don't know why I think Lee Montague.
I think so, yeah.
I was just one. But yeah, these are, go back to Lee Montague. You guys will be working with steel rod and fabric and vellum, and you'll be able to make pieces very much like this.
Oh, well then, Montague, I hope so. But
Also, Leanne, this is Mom's reflection.
Oh, great.
yeah, the influence that seeing her work gave me license to do what I did with my bronze pieces or my sculpture, in installing things, which she did very liberally. And this is a sculpture of hers. She just worked with her raw material. You have a question, Maddie? Yeah? And these are the last couple of slides. This is the work that I'm doing now, is going back into the material itself. And working with scrap clay in my studio and building with it and just seeing what will happen. And I was delighted with this piece when I saw the intensity of the color that came up in the clay, old clay that had been worked and thrown back into the vat. So these are the latest pieces that I'm doing now, with wanting to have this material show, the material itself. And as I mentioned to some of you, I do these collages as a way of getting my unconscious imagery up and coming up with work like this. So I thank you all very much. These are the major things that I wanted to get across, that you're in a process and that you got to figure out what you want to talk about, and you're developing your style all along. And I love this quote: "Walk not in the footsteps of the masters, but seek what they sought." Find out what were they trying to talk about. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Yeah, you're very welcome.